And APEC really was...
Tell us a bit more about the APEC story.
APEC was interesting. It was a story that came out of a sort of a group discussion in the Prime Minister's office. He was due to go on a big overseas trip and wanted to something new to talk about. And I don't know that anybody can say he was particularly the father of it. There were about 4 or 5 of them talking what to do, how could we get some new economic arrangements in East Asia and Southeast Asia. And so Bob went in to talk to the president of South Korea and proposed this idea to him, and very deliberately, there's a recount in the book, they left the Americans out. It was going to be the Asia Pacific, but no mention of the Americans, because had the Americans been included from the word go, a lot of the Asian countries would have said, oh no, Australia's just a cat's paw for the United States. And so the Americans went berserk, as they often were in those days. Of course, the Hawke and Keating governments actually stood up to the Americans much more than subsequent governments did. Maintained the friendship, but wouldn't just kowtow to what the Americans wanted. So the Americans went berserk, and then it was the Asian countries said, oh well, okay, it's all right if they come now. Now we're all in. But then the great trick was to get both China and Taiwan to come into APEC, because China at the time hated Taiwan and vice versa, and they were shouting at each other and it generally just couldn't be, well, literally couldn't be in a room together. And Bob sent our very, very good diplomat, Richard Woolcott, to China and said, look, it will be economies, large economies, not countries. And the Chinese said, oh, well, all right. We can think about that. And that's how it formed. But it was a piece of dramatically successful and suave diplomacy on Australia's part.
Do you think anyone except the very diplomatic and suave Woolcott could have pulled it off?
I doubt it. He really is something he can just about walk on feathers.
Played a good game of squash too with the previous Prime Minister, but that was a long time ago. Woolcott was accompanying Billy McMahon, and Billy, I think, walked into Woolcott's racket. When you're playing the Prime Minister, you do tend to try to avoid that sort of thing. But as a young reporter in the press gallery, I heard from a lot of people that McMahon was a terrible hogger of the court. Blanche, it's now past 2 weeks since this book was launched by the present Prime Minister, by Julia Gillard, in Sydney. The first week was fairly hectic. There were some strong reactions. You'll all be familiar with
one of
Paul Keating's reaction. And an Adelaide audience might be less familiar with the fact that your stepdaughter, Sue, wrote a firm and loving piece for The Age about her mother, wanting to place Hazel in what Sue regarded as the appropriate, with the appropriate prominence in the whole story. Were they surprises?
Well, kind of yes and no.
Not Paul.
Not Paul, because he is known for having hissy fits when he doesn't like something. So he'd written the letter privately, and then 3 or 4 days later he released it to the Australian, and the editor of the Australian, realising the effect it would have on publicity for the book, sent the publisher of the book, Louise Adler, a one-word text: happy? With Sue, she was talked into writing that piece for the it was for the Age initially,
yes.
and I think then it was published in some parts of the Sydney Morning Herald, when she hadn't read either the book or seen the movie. So she was really going on advertisements and excerpts. So,
and I should say, if you don't mind me interrupting, that if you haven't read it, it was clear from this 2,000-word piece that a lot of what Sue wrote was in awkward anticipation of what might have been in the movie.
Yes, that's right.
That's right. That's quite clearly so. And
yes.
Because at that stage there was a fair bit of promotional work going on for the film as well.
Oh, it was wall to wall. And of course the film has absolutely nothing to do with the book. It was a completely independent thing. Neither Bob nor I had any editorial say over what they said or didn't. I might say, I think most of you would agree that you just would prefer not to be portrayed naked in a sex scene if you had a choice in the matter. So we couldn't do anything about that. And of course it's a drama, which is the film's a drama, and in a drama you must have a protagonist and an antagonist. So it's a horrible thing that a lot of young people who really don't know history can take these things as being historical when they're not. They're entertainment, and they're so deformed from what is the truth that they're not complete nonsense. A number of the facts are right, but it's not how the government was, and it wasn't how the relationship between Paul and Bob was.
Indeed. We'll come back to that a bit later too, I think. But this was certainly, it was clear to everyone who was taking the slightest bit of notice of what was going on around them that that was the way the film was going to be. And as you say, some of that drove some of Sue's reaction.
Yes, yes. She probably should have waited until she'd seen the film, because it was perfectly nice about her mother. It showed her mother in a very good light.
Well,
it was very nice about her mother, but also an inaccurate portrait of her.
It was incomplete, but it was not nearly as incomplete as some of the promotions had led us to believe, which was
yes.
possibly how some of that
yes.
happened.
Yes.
That would have been distressing.
Well, I could have lived without it, that's true. But really, there is so much nonsense in the news media. It's important to remember that the point of a great deal of journalism is to make mischief. There is no denying that. It's not even to the aim to inform. A lot of the time the aim is just to make mischief, which frequently includes misinforming. So one's aware of that if one is in the public eye at all. I don't think I've ever had an accurate story written about me. Even once I gave a recipe for a salad, and that was wrong.
You sound as though you remember that one with some intensity.
I do. They put
Possibly
onions
even
in
what
it,
the error
and
was.